And it was more time, I feel like, that we had spent together and us actually talking about our goals.
Mhm.
That was more time we'd ever had in, 5 or 6 years that we'd been together at that point. And that, again, that was really transformative. Instead of, "This is what Josh is doing, this is what Allie is doing," it's like, "Well, this is what we could be doing," and specifically that "we" thing was real estate.
You guys grew up in very different environments and grew up with very different money blueprints. So I want to go into that a little bit. And then I'm very curious about how you've married those. And as a couple, I'm recently married in the last year and a half, 2 years, and marrying money blueprints can be a challenge. So I first want to start off just hearing about your different backgrounds growing up and the money models you had. And then we'll get into how you tried to get those to meet up and work together with a similar vision.
That's such a great question, and it's so important. I think that often when we think about coupling up with someone in a romantic sense, are you attracted to them? Do you have fun talking to them? We think about like all of the fun stuff, but we don't necessarily talk about like what was your upbringing and what baggage do you bring to the table, and do you have challenges with money? Like, what is your money mindset? And I think we certainly did not have that conversation prior to coming together. It ended up working out, but we could not have grown up in more different backgrounds. I grew up like relatively middle class. We had everything we needed. I remember money was always kind of like a stressful thing, but we always had enough money to pay our bills. And I definitely had everything I needed growing up. I was taught the importance of saving, the importance of having a job, but aside from that, we didn't talk about money like, investing wasn't a conversation, but I had some baseline fundamentals of, like, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, it was quite the opposite. There was incredible money stress, and we never talked about money simply because we never had it.
Mhm.
We couldn't pay our bills. I was raised by a single mom of three in a small rural town in upstate New York. We kind of got evicted from mobile home to mobile home. I moved, I don't know, 6 or 7 times before I was 10 years old,
Mhm.
kind of in and out of foster care a couple times. And what I will say, though, is that growing up in that environment kind of forced me to realize that if I was going to have any type of lifestyle that I was happy about or proud of, I was going to have to make it happen. No one else was going to come in and wave a wand and make my life better. And thankfully, too, I also there's the expression "it takes a village to raise a child." What I did have was I had a village, especially in terms of coaches, mentors, teachers, people who kind of took me under my wing. And so I learned the value of work ethic really early on in life. But I also carried a lot of money baggage with me late into my 20s, especially when it came time to like, if you had money, growing up where I come from, you spend it as fast as you can
Mhm.
because you don't know when it's going to happen again. So you don't save, you don't think of the future, you live for the now.
Yeah. So did you have jobs growing up, Josh? Like, were you always hustling? Did you have kind of a chip on your shoulder a little bit? My dad grew up very poor, and he has definitely had a chip on his shoulder where he was like, I'm going to prove to the world that, I'm going to make a difference and change things financially for myself and my family. Did you have any
Oh,
of that at all?
100%. Yeah, no, I think I was 14 and I got my first job, quote unquote, like off the books because I'm not even sure if I had my working papers yet, but there was an event company by us that did like corporate parties for companies when they were celebrating, and there would be like food and rides and stuff like that. And I would ride my bike because I didn't have a car, so I would ride my bike to the business. One of the employees would pick me up, and three or four of other of us, and we would go work events. And that was, say I was 13 or 14 years old. Once I was old enough, I knew I wanted to have a car one day when I turned 16. No one was going to buy it for me.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would work two or three jobs. So I'd go to school. I participated in football and different sports. And then after the sport, I would go work a job for as many hours as I could to make the money that I needed to then find a car because I knew that having a car would give me greater access to more job opportunities so that I could work my way through high school and beyond.
So you definitely learned to be a hustler and develop grit at a pretty young age.
Yeah, it was kinda like, was it, survive or die kinda thing, and work for I knew that if I was gonna get out of my environment, I needed to find ways to work my way out of my environment, and thankfully, higher education was also a huge resource there.
So let's get into that. Was I know you both went on to college, but was that pushed for you, Josh? Was that like this is your path out of how you grew up, or tell me about that? Like I'm curious if higher education was pushed as a means to change
Not at
your
all.
no?
No, no, it was, military was more prominent or just working,
Mhm.
Or
um,
jail.
or
Or
jail. Yeah,
jail.
no. And I actually, through the kind of stars aligned for me, if you will. Like I said, I played every sport a kid could possibly play growing up. And as a result, I always tell people I had like 4 or 5 different quote unquote moms, if you will, people who kind of always looked out for me, and I'm sure behind the scenes they all talked about, which sport I was in and, they looked after me. But, anyways, one of those women, her name was Lenore. Lenore's son got accepted to a college through what's called an educational opportunity program for disenfranchised youth. And she spoke to me. We were getting ready to graduate high school. So this is probably like May or June. And she said, "Hey, her son Eric got accepted into a program. What's your plans for after high school?" And I had no plans. I was like, "Oh, maybe there's a 2-year college one day, but I don't really." I,
Like, he didn't take his SATs, like,
yeah,
it wasn't even on
wasn't
the
on my
On the
yeah.
radar.
radar.
And
Yeah.
thankfully, she grabbed me that day and was like, and I didn't have a computer, so she had a computer, at her home, and she said, "You're gonna apply for the Educational Opportunity Program," acronym is EOP, and I was like, "Okay, if Lenora says I should do it." And, I applied to one college, and, it's called the Oneonta State College in upstate New York, and subsequently, I got in, frankly, because of, the economic conditions that I went into, and that was my college courting experience. And then 2 months later, I was in a town and city enrolled in college I'd never heard of, but I just figured it was better than where I grew up.
Yeah, that's awesome that you had that kind of influence. Lenora, was that her name that pushed you in that
Yeah.
direction?
Yeah, she was one of those moms who, I mean, she made sure I got to every single practice that she could. She had 3 other sons herself, but she would always pack like a sandwich or a power bar. I competed in wrestling growing up, and those are like 7, 8-hour tournament
Yeah.
long days. And she would always make sure I had different snacks and stuff like that. And so, yeah, she fulfilled that all the way up to when I was getting ready to graduate high school, and she made sure I got into college.
So did you guys how did you Allie, I wanted you're both in kind of social work careers going into
Mhm.
college. Did you was that kind of thought out? That's the direction you guys both wanted to go. You wanted to help people, or did you consider other options like, you know, to make a higher income? I mean, it's unfortunate, but human services, that just the income often is
Mhm.
not very great. I worked in human services previously, and it was like,
Yeah.
horrible, but fulfilling, like you're doing important work, and it's rewarding. But I wanted to hear about that, like how you guys chose your majors and careers.
I have kind of a jaded view about that. But if you asked me at the time, it was, I wanted to help people.
Yeah.
I wanted to do something that I was passionate about and have a meaningful impact. I think that looking back, we both had a good amount of trauma in our lives,
Mhm.
and we were maybe put in that role early on of being helpers.
Mhm.
And I think that it was just a natural evolution to want to pursue that as jobs. And I think that very often, when you have an 18-year-old that has no concept of money or finance, and you say, "You're going to have a lot of student loan debt," they're like, "Everyone has debt. It's okay. You just can't possibly conceptualize what that really means." And I remember our professors were like, "You're not in this for the money. You're in it for, helping, and you're not gonna make a lot of money." And I was like, "Who cares? Why do I care?" And then, like, you graduate and you're like, "I have so many bills to pay and I have so much debt, and I actually do want a nice life,
Yeah.
and the money that I'm making here is not gonna give me the life that I want." And I think looking back, like, it completely makes sense why we went into those fields, but, I think that ultimately, like, yeah, we weren't thinking about the income, we weren't thinking about the ripple effects, and I think passion is so important, but passion doesn't pay the bills because in my experience, a lot of those human service careers, especially the entry level ones, there's a high level of burnout.
Mhm.
So in the beginning, you're making an impact, and then it's like it's challenging for you as a person, and then the income really hits you. So yeah, I think I definitely have more of a jaded perspective on our early years in human services, but of course it's important and meaningful work. But I wish that that industry was appreciated more.
Sure. Looking back on things, would either of you studied something else, like finance or accounting or any thoughts like that?
No, no, it's actually, I think it's played a pivotal role in kind of who we are today and kind of the work that we do today. Because a lot of the schooling that we had, and then the careers that we both worked in for I think almost 10 years, a lot of it came down to just understanding human behavior, human psychology, understanding how to communicate effectively. I always tell people because I think, collectively amassed over $102,000 in student loans, and people were like, "Well, was it worth it?" Absolutely, in the sense that, I mean, it's also where we met. So
We were
I
in the same degree. That's how we met.
yeah,
Yep.
Right.
so I would take the debt all over, but I don't know, knowing what I know now too, I don't think I would have wished I. We actually we started in different majors. I started off as an environmental science major, and I realized I didn't want to examine dirt, for the next 30 or 40 years. And so then I transitioned into, human services. But no, I don't think I would do anything different.
So I'm a big person that I like where I'm at in my life now. And I think that every micro decision I made led me to this point. So I'm not big on would I do something different, because I feel like I truly believe like everything happens for a reason.
Mhm.
Would I encourage our daughter to go into that field? Like, it's a hard no for me. I
Right.
would I would dissuade her, because now I think again I have a different perspective about the purpose of employment and generating money and what it can do for you in your life. So I think you need to have a balance between providing value and feeling good about yourself, but also being able to afford to exist in a way that gives you the life that you want. So I don't think we had a balanced perspective when we went into it. So I would hope to instill more of that in her.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I wanted to get back to, you guys are a couple, get engaged, you're seeing a therapist. We talked about that a little bit. I just came from couples counseling and I think there's a lot of benefits to it. My wife and I did the same thing prior to getting married. We started with a therapist just to get on the same page, and we're not. Like, we have different financial blueprints, and there's some headbutting that happens. I want to save. She wants to, buy a new couch, and sometimes there's conflict with that. So, tell me about how you guys have managed that. Just having different environments that you grew up in, and then the different ideas of getting on the same page. How have you handled that? 'Cause I'm working
Uh,
on it. I'm looking for advice.
It's so hard. It's so hard. I think it can be a make it or break it for
Oh,
couples.
yeah.
I think number 1, it comes down to communication, because you have to realize that most couples don't even communicate about it. Our heads are in the sand, and I spend how I want and you spend how you want. I mean, you have 2 independent humans, and now we have to merge ourselves, and it's not just love, it's a business relationship.
Yep,
So, how do we have this new business together and navigate it appropriately? I think in the beginning, it was so hard.
yep.
Josh brought a lot of money mistakes into the relationship, just impulsive spending, bringing on a lot of credit card debt, that kind of stuff. And I was way more cautious. So, from a negative perspective, that's what we were staring at.
Mhm.
From a positive, I have never met someone with more grit and resilience in my life.
Right.
And Josh is such a dreamer, and he's so goal oriented. And I think it's because of his upbringing. So you can look at it 2 ways, like, wow, Josh was really bad with his money and, he's irresponsible, or Josh is so motivated and he's so hardworking. So it was important to view both of those perspectives. Um, but I think that our differences are ultimately what led to our success, because I am very calculated and cautious, and I want to make sure we're doing what we need to do. Josh is very big picture dreamer, and I think combining those 2 things, it was actually a really good balance and a strength.
Yeah, I think too for us, prior to us being able to effectively kind of merge our kind of money mindsets, if you will, we both had to do a lot of kind of like deep work with ourselves. So like we've had couples marriage or marriage counseling for the better part of 6 years. We've also done individual therapy. And so I wanted to understand, why do I think and operate that I do when it comes to money,
Mhm.
spending, what are my values, so on and so forth. Allie's done the same. And then in doing so, it allowed us to have, like, I think, more productive dialogue. And then it became less of a me versus a we type of venture that we started doing together, especially when we started kind of casting out our joint vision for the life that we wanted to have versus what my vision was versus her vision. And that was really helpful.
How did you do that visioning process? Was there a book or any exercises that you guys did together to try to get on the same page?
100% bribery. There's no other way about it. We, Josh got way more into personal finance in the beginning than I did. And he needed a way to rope me into it. So he enticed me with, like, let's have a bottle of wine and get our favorite takeout and have like a financial date night. And it made it so fun. And we talk about just like, what do you want your life to look like? What do you want the next 5 years, 10 years to look like? And we didn't get into the nitty-gritty dollar thing, more just like big picture of like, what are our hopes and dreams? And when we mapped out our hopes and dreams, I remember then it was like, well, how do we get there? And it was glaringly obvious that everything we were doing was going to prevent us from getting there.
Right.
So then it's not really like Josh being this dictator telling us how we need to adjust. It's us saying, if this is the life we want, we need to do things differently. So we kind of changed our shift of, hey, Josh, I want to buy this. Well, Allie, you can't. Hey, Allie, I want to invest in this. Well, I don't want to, these are our goals, and here is how we need to get here. And the money problem was both of our problems. And how can we work collaboratively to solve it?
And one person I want to kind of shout out to is, his name is Andy Hill from Marriage, Kids, and Money. And Andy and his wife and their family, Andy shared their story from a lot of debt to paying off all their debt to becoming, I think, millionaires in their 30s. And him and his wife went through a lot of these types of similar activities. And they're a few years older than us, and so it was really helpful learning from them. But an activity that Andy and his wife Nicole did was, Andy sat down with Nicole and said, paint a picture for me, talk to me, describe to me like your perfect day. And I think they have two little ones now, and they were just about to become parents at the time. And for Nicole, family was a big value, and so Nicole said, I'd love to be able to, be a stay-at-home mom. I'd love for us to be able to travel as a family. Andy was working, 70, 80 hours a week. He was traveling all the time. I'd love for you to be more home. So instead of Andy just coming at her with Excel sheets and podcasts, which he did copious amounts of times, he stepped back and said, how can I speak Nicole's money language?
Mm.
And for Nicole, it wasn't, the Excel sheets and the 4% rule and stuff like that. It was more so envisioning the lifestyle, or as like Ramit Sethi would say, like her rich life.
Mhm.
And that, and then kind of reverse engineering from there, like Allie said, that was really transformative. And as like a student, if you will, of like real estate and finance, I took that, I brought it home one day. We sat in our apartment back then and we did it. And that, I think, was a real fork in the road moment for us.
I was listening to an interview you guys did, and weren't you on a little bit of different page? Like, you were working a ton, right, Josh? And then Allie, you wanted to focus on family and friends. How did that, how did that unfold once you realized you were, your time, how you wanted to spend it was two different ways?
Honestly, this was a fluke stroke of luck because I mean, I guess we would have figured it out, but what ended up happening, I mean, Josh was working 60 plus hours a week at a company. He was mid-level management. He took his career very, very seriously, but it really detracted from our quality time with each other and family. And I cared about my work, but I cared more about like working to live, not living to work.
Mhm.
That was the delineating factor. Like, I was working so that I could live and enjoy my life. Josh, it felt more like you were living to work. His life was his work. So I remember we were heading towards our wedding, And I was like, dude, I don't know if I can marry this person in the sense of I don't want a partner that's so obsessed with work in that way. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we weren't aligned. Like, I think if both people have a good understanding of how the other person is and they're happy with that, great. I wasn't happy with the dynamic. As fate would have it, Josh got laid off. And at the time, it felt like our world was crumbling, but it actually was one of the best things that ever happened to us because I think it gave you the perspective of like, you have this job that you pour your life into, and very quickly
Rug
on a
pull.
Friday, you're
Yeah.
throwing all your stuff in a black garbage bag and whatever. But I think that was such a pivotal moment for us, and that helped us get on the same page. So really, it was dumb luck because it's nothing that we did; it was an external force. But that really helped us get more aligned.
Once you got laid off, Josh, weren't you like taking Allie to her master's program, and you guys had a lot of time to talk to and from, like, while in the car?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, well, so the year prior to getting well, the year prior to our wedding and then the year prior to me getting laid off, Allie actually had graduated with her master's, and that was in the planning of the wedding. That was actually and we've been together 5 years or so at that point. The act of planning a wedding, I think, was the first time we ever actually sat down and started to calculate our income, our expenses, because 'cause we're like, "Well, how are we gonna pay for this wedding?" And she had just graduated with our master's. It was our first time actually tallying up car loan, credit card loan, massive student loans.
Right.
And then at that time too, Allie and I were talking, well, I'm gone all the time. We're about to get married. We have all this debt. How does life ever change?
Mhm.
Mhm.
And that kind of thrust us into the world of personal finance, and we started with Dave Ramsey. How do we pay off this debt kind of stuff? And so we kind of made that commitment of becoming debt free in 2017. But I was still working all the time. And then Allie was working out too. So then I get fired. Now I'm unemployed. I'm driving Uber for 8 hours a day.
Mhm.
And so for the first time ever, yeah, I would bring Allie to work in the morning. And during those, whatever it was, 30-minute car rides, we would just talk about our goals and our vision. And then I'd drop Allie off to work. I would drive for Uber for 7 or 8 hours a day. I'd go pick up Allie. And it was more time, I feel like, that we had spent together and us actually talking about our goals.
Mhm.
That was more time we'd ever had in, 5 or 6 years that we'd been together at that point. And that, again, that was really transformative. Instead of this is what Josh is doing, this is what Allie is doing, it's like, well, this is what we could be doing. And specifically, that we thing was real estate.
So when you first started getting, you had what, $102,000 of debt, I think was the number that I heard. You got into Dave Ramsey and the debt snowball pay down thing. Talk to me about a little bit about that, like how your understanding of personal finances have changed since you got into Dave Ramsey and how it's evolved over time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really grateful we
Yeah.
found Total Money Makeover because I think it was as simple as like, well, how do you pay off debt? And Dave Ramsey popped up, and so we found that, and that kind of learned to coach us into talking about finances, having a budget, which we'd never had prior, to kind of delineating between needs and wants. And so we started that, and we took it really serious. So we were doing the rice and beans lifestyle
Mhm.
for a few months there, and of course, at that point, I was like, Allie, we need to sell our cars. We need to sell all of our, a lot of our, material things. We need to pay off debt, blah, blah, blah. And we skipped going out on date nights. And we realized that while there's some value to it, and I'm really thankful for, some of the fundamentals it taught us, it wasn't sustainable for our life.
Mhm.
And so conveniently at that time in 2017, this was the author, Scott Trench, he's the CEO of Bigger Pockets, released a book called Set for Life. And I remember discovering this book, and it was honestly perfect because it felt like it was a roadmap that we could follow that worked for our values and our lifestyle. And it didn't feel as, I guess, maybe as extreme or limiting as like the Total Money Makeover. And so once we kind of used that book as our roadmap, if you will, it felt kind of like, yeah, we now had a clear path or a more clear path by which we could achieve our financial freedom goals.
So is that reading Set for Life in Scott's book, is that when real estate really came online, when you started to pursue goals towards acquiring some properties and building a portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our biggest thing was, I mean, we were, as we expressed earlier, we were pretty low income professionals,
Mhm.
even with Allie with a master's degree. And so now that we had a budget, there was a glaring number in our budget, which was rent. And we didn't really have the capacity back then to earn much more.
Mhm.
And so it's like, well, we can't really earn more. So what levers can you control? Well, if we can't earn more, we can try to spend less. So we were cutting out, like I said, the date nights, the Starbucks, the Netflix, and stuff like that. And those are valuable. We talk a lot about using like spoons versus shovels to get out of debt. So when we actually read that book and we realized, I think it's 70% or so of the average person's budget is housing, food, and transportation.
Mhm.
Food, we tightened up a little bit, but really it was our car payments and rent. And so our kind of push into real estate wasn't necessarily to build a portfolio as much as it was what's the most expeditious way that we can greatly reduce or even cancel out our rent such that we could pay off our debt faster. And that was kind of how we got started in real estate.
And that, Allie, that was house hacking, right? Your first purchase was a house hack. Tell me a little
Yeah.
bit about that, what that looked like.
Hey guys, it's Clay Fink here, host of We Study Billionaires. Today, I wanted to tell you about our show sponsor, Vacasa. The dream of owning a vacation home can be daunting. From finding the best guests, to the maintenance, to organizing the cleaners after every guest stay. With Vacasa, they make that dream into a reality. As a full-service vacation home management company with vacation homes in key destinations across the US, they know how to make owning a vacation home easy and profitable. On top of proactive property maintenance visits by professional local teams, a data-driven booking platform, and around-the-clock support, homeowners earn on average 20% more revenue from their vacation homes. Vacasa makes vacation home ownership easy. If you're looking to make more from your vacation homes by doing less, partner with Vacasa at vacasa.com. That's vacasa.com.
Well, we were very interested in getting a first house hack to reduce our cost of living. But in 2018, which is crazy to say because now the market is even crazier, but the market was very competitive. So we didn't really have any money. So we scraped together like every dollar we had. We planned to put 5% down. And we were looking at properties on the MLS, on Redfin that everyone else was seeing, and we were putting in offers, and we were getting outbid by people that were putting in $50,000 more. They were paying in cash. It just seemed outrageous. So we like painstakingly put in probably half a dozen offers. Eventually finding our first house hack. It was an off market deal. Our realtor at the time found it for us. It was one of his clients that was selling. And it just was like the perfect situation. I think often when we think about house hacks, we think about, well, you must be living in a bad area. It must not be nice. I mean, this was an upgrade from our quote unquote luxury apartment. It was 3 bedroom, private backyard, garage. It was beautiful. It was so nice. And I think that was where Josh got the buy-in from me because I saw that our quality of life didn't have to diminish. I think one thing that I'll add is very often when couples are trying to get on the same page, and we've talked to so many couples about this, one person is super gung ho about investing money, whatever. The other person is kind of being dragged along.
Mhm.
And I think that's not sustainable because it creates more of like a power imbalance in a relationship. Like we should both be equals, but somehow it reverted to like Josh is my manager and he's telling me what I need to do and how I need to manage my money and what I can spend money on. And I don't think that's a healthy dynamic for couples because you should be 100% equal. So I think that getting on the same page and getting buy in from your partner is so critical because no one should feel like their spouse is their manager. They should feel like they are completely equal partners and we're making these joint decisions. So the buy-in is essential, and I think seeing how nice that duplex was like the first piece of buy-in that Josh got from me because I was like, "Oh, this is really nice. I'm excited to live here. Real estate doesn't seem that bad anymore." And that definitely helped.
And just one thing I'll add to that is I was very much the Excel sheet. It's got a cash flow. What's the return on investment? thankfully, Allie has a better perspective than I do because, full disclosure, I was bringing us to the worst neighborhoods.
Mhm.
I was just trying to find the best return on investment. I was completely negating the value of feeling comfortable where you live. And early on, there was a lot of, I think that caused a lot of strife. And so we go back to the importance of having a joint vision, sharing your values, communicating. And so, the first property that we got, I think, was a home run, but a lot of that was because we jointly agreed upon it versus me leading the charge and just going through what the Excel sheet said.
And like you said, doing a house hack, just pursuing FI takes a lot of sacrifices. Allie, were you on board with the house hacking idea? Because, you've got roommates or you've got somebody living next to you in a duplex. How did you think about that?
Like, it sounds dramatic, but I really felt like Josh was borderline ruining my life. Um, I was so opposed to all of it. I was gonna get my state job and work it for 30 years, and I wanted to get a nice mid-size SUV and a nice two-story colonial home, and just, like, we went on one family vacation a year, and it was this nice, like, cookie cutter life, and
Yeah.
I think there's nothing wrong with that. It's the only route that I really saw because it's the only thing that I thought existed. So when Josh started saying crazy things like invest and be landlords, and it just seemed a little too wild for me. It seemed a little too exotic. I was like, I don't know what this is. It seems scary, and it just doesn't seem like the life that I pictured. And I think when we have a vision of what we want our life to look like and then we take like a hard left turn, it's hard to get our brain into that new reality of like life can look different. So I was super opposed. Even when we bought the house hack, I liked it, but I would not call us real estate investors. It's like we're doing this to pay down our debt. We're not going to be like people that own a lot of rentals. So it was a lot of painful conversations and disagreements before I drank the Kool-Aid and got really into it.
So tell me more about that. Like, what point did you decide we want to build a portfolio? We want to do more than just this one simple house hack. We want to build your empire, let's say, your portfolio of real estate that is going to fuel your financial independence. Talk to me about that process, like how the steps you took and the strategies that you had for that.
I think that all along Josh wanted that. He wanted it, but he knew he had to temper his
Yeah.
his approach with me. So we bought the first rental property, and in my mind I'm like, well, after the first rental, we're going to get the single family home.
Mhm.
And then we ended up finding a second rental that we house hacked again. It was 6 houses down from our first. It was great. And then I was like, well, after that one, we're going to get the single family home. But that second rental was a game changer because we lived for free. The cash flow from
Right.
property one, plus, everything from property two, we were now living for free. We had a $0 housing payment. And that's when it got a little more fun.
Mhm.
We were aggressively paying down the debt. We had more disposable income. We were able to travel more, and we were seeing those quality of life ripples from making more prudent financial decisions. So then from there, it was like, well, where do we want our life to go from here? And I think once you kind of get into it and you see the potential,
Mhm.
your mindset kind of opens up to like, how far can we take this? And I think that second property definitely opened me up to more
And
possibilities.
I would say too, that second property came in October of 2020. 7 months prior to that, the world shut down.
Yeah.
And similar to 2018, when I got fired, and Allie and I had more time than we'd ever had prior to that to really sit down and just talk, but actually listen and kind of cast this joint vision. We were both home from March of 2020
To like
until
April or May.
so we
May.
had like two, well, even maybe 3 months or so. It was our first time being home together for extended periods of time and not just for the purpose of vacation.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that it was a good thing. Obviously, we all know what happened. That was a life-changing experience for us in the sense that we said, well, we own a couple properties now. Our debt, I think we had paid off maybe half of our debt at that point, but we said, this is kind of nice.
Mhm.
How can we craft a lifestyle where we're home together all the time? Because again, prior to that, Allie, we were both back to working 9 to 5 jobs prior to that. I would drive with Allie to her job. I'd drop her off at work. We would talk about our visions. And yeah, so then I feel like that kind of further instilled in us the importance of we need to buy as many deals as possible, as well as keep our expenses low because we'd gotten rid of car payments too. So we were living at that point on about, I think, $2,400 $2,500 a month.
Mhm.
Because our housing and transportation were almost nothing. And so then it was just like, okay, we need to do whatever we need to do to build a portfolio such that we can be together home all the time. And at that point too, we began the conversation of starting a family and how could we make that happen as well.
Yeah, I mentioned my wife's a therapist, and when COVID hit, she saw that couples went. I mean, it was a real test for all couples, right? You're home together day in and day out. You really learn whether you like your spouse or partner or not. So it's a really great test to see, can
Yeah.
you run a business together too? Because running a business, as you guys know, like you're doing the grind together, and it's
Mhm.
you've got the marriage, but it's also like Ali, you said, it's a business relationship too.
Mhm.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I agree with you.
That you're constantly, especially now as young parents, in the span of a 60 minutes, we could rotate. We're husband and
Right.
wife, we're CEO, co-CEOs, we're parents, all in the span of 60 minutes. So it's constantly being able to kind of compartmentalize this work talk and transition to family or, kind of interpersonal talk. Yeah.
Like, Mom Allie is really pissed off at you right now, but
Yeah.
Business Allie needs to make a decision with you and problem solve
Yeah.
effectively. So being able to take those hats off and kind of put a pin in something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. I wanted to hear during this time, Josh, were you reading? I mean, you mentioned Set for Life, but were you listening to a lot of podcasts? Were there other books that were making a big influence on you as you were thinking about how we can escape, traditional
Yeah.
employment and get financial independence?
Yeah, I remember reading the book Seven Habits of Highly Successful People.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things that they talk about in the book is like basically turning your car into, a virtual library, if you will.
Yep.
So I will say, and this was 2017. So from 2017 until now, anytime, unless it's Allie and I, if I'm in the car, I'm learning.
Hmm.
I always have a podcast going. I haven't really like listened to the radio in the better
Right.
part of 7 years per se.
Hmm.
So yeah, I am a voracious. I could say reader. Full disclosure, I struggle with sitting down with an actual book. Now, put it on audio or different means of listening to it. I'll consume the same book 5 times and hear it 6 different ways each time.
Right.
And so, yeah, I'm constantly learning, constantly studying. I'm grateful the fact that, like, so folks like, Set for Life's author, Scott Trench, Chad Carson, he's another
Hmm.
real estate
Yep.
investor, author, podcast host. A lot of these people have become good friends of ours.
Hmm.
And so, along with learning from their content, also learning from them directly has been really helpful. Just as our life and business and real estate has evolved.
Yeah. So I want to hear how you guys actually made the move completely away from traditional employment to full-time, real estate investors supporting your life and being able to work from home and being able to have the freedom to, essentially do what you want. Tell me a little bit more about that.
COVID changed everything, and I don't want to minimize the, like, global trauma that COVID caused for so many people and, like, the negative things, but, like, for us, a lot of there was some positive that came from COVID in the sense that we were home together for 3 months, and we wanted more. We were obsessed.
Yeah.
We loved being able to have time with each other other than, like, I'm grumpy in the morning and I'm exhausted in the evening.
Yeah.
I think that I was a school social worker. The schools were hit so hard from COVID. So going back to the schools was really, really challenging. And I was really burnt out.
Mhm.
So the career that I thought I wanted for 30 years, I was like, I don't know if I can do 30 more minutes. So immediately I was like, I need to craft my exit plan. And Josh was like, this is great. Okay,
Right.
let's do it.
I've been
Um,
waiting for this moment.
Yeah, exactly.
so, So I think for us, it was we're very data driven and numbers driven. So it was very like, what do we spend every month? We spend $2,500. Well, how can we make $2,500 not from jobs to replace our income that we need? So it was really like Josh and I have been hustlers. We never had money. We never had, family money, resources, network. So it was literally like, let's network our butts off. We both had full-time jobs and multiple part-time jobs. We launched the Fi Couple on Instagram, not really thinking much of it, but then realizing this can become a business within itself as well. So we just did everything we could to find different types of income streams. We continued to buy some more rentals, but slowly because we were paying down so much debt. And it was really just doing it in steps. I think so often, like we had $100,000 of debt. We need to pay that off. No, let's pay off 5,000. Then let's do it again. Then let's do it again. So with replacing our income so that we could leave our full-time jobs, it was the same thing. It was how can we make $1,000 not from W-2s? How can we make 2,000? Um, and and kind of just building it from there.
And I think too, in like entrepreneurship land, there's like the old adage, like jump out of the airplane and build your parachute on the way down.
Mhm.
We're way more conservative than that.
Mhm.
And so, as Ali was saying, as we kind of did all the math, we started kind of okay, we're 25% of the way there, 50% of the way there. Eventually, especially once we began the family planning process, and we began the process of in vitro fertilization, and frankly, seeing the toll that it was taking on Allie, we got to that point where we knew maybe we can't yet go, leave our jobs full time, but at the least we could drop down to 50%. So maybe work 15 to 20 hours a week for maintaining our benefits, but also let's see how this feels, kind of part time, financial freedom, entrepreneurship, if you will.
Mhm.
And it was amazing. And I think we made that transition. Was it 2022?
Everything we've done has been in steps. Like
Yeah.
we quit our full time, now we're part time. We quit our part time, now we're full time entrepreneurs. So we've been very, very cautious with it,
Calculated.
and
Mm.
calculated. And I think that's helped us.
That's a really good way to think about it. Instead of just, going cold turkey from a W-2
All
job
or
to
nothing.
nothing, kind of scale it back. Take some part-time work, take some side gigs, work your way towards that. That's a really smart way to do it. I wanted to
Mhm.
talk a little bit about how you thought about paying down debt versus making investments in real estate, let's say. So, let's say you had a high credit card, 18% you're paying. That's a pretty good return to pay that off. Talk to me a
Hmm.
little bit about your strategy for how you used your money, whether to decide to pay off debt or to use it to buy a new investment property.
Well, I think the first challenge that we faced, as we've alluded to, was we had limited income and we weren't in industries where we could radically increase our income. So, number one was how can we reduce our expenses? Because that's something that felt like it was more in our control. So, we invested money to reduce our cost of living by house hacks. So, that was number one. We optimized our expenses and got it as low as possible. From there, it was this cool scenario of we have some disposable income now. Do we use it to further pay down debt or to invest to make more disposable income, right? Um we balanced it kind of with quarterly goals. So we're big. Josh has 20 whiteboards and we're big on goal planning and setting this kind of stuff. So we kind of do it by quarterly sprints. Quarter one, we're focused on debt payoff. Quarter two, we're going to save money towards rental properties. Quarter three, we're going to recoup. Quarter four, we're going to pay some more debt. So instead of again looking at it like we need to pay off 100,000 by breaking it up into more smaller manageable chunks, it helped maintain momentum and motivation. And it kind of kept it fresh. It wasn't so monotonous. Like every 90 days, we were kind of shifting focus a little bit. I'd agree with you. We always prioritize very high interest debt, but it got to the point where like student loans are at 5%. So we wanted to pay those down because there was the emotional component, but we were pretty good with pivoting back and forth to have a balanced approach with that.
And we also knew, frankly, our debt to income ratio, especially when we got started, our lenders were very transparent with us. They're like, I think we can underwrite you. This is pretty tight. But if
Mhm.
you shave off some of that debt, knowing what you guys want to do, it'll help you. So yeah, we would buy a piece of real estate and then which inherently would add to our balance sheet. Yes, good debt, bad debt. But either way, it didn't always help our debt to income ratio. So then it just became a matter of we were kind of like almost interest rate agnostic. It was just like, what's the thing that's going to increase our probability of getting another mortgage? Oh,
Mhm.
we have to pay down X amount of debt. And sometimes we had it down to like a specific number. Okay, let's pay that down so that when we go to buy that next rental property, our probability of getting qualified so we can subsequently buy would go up. And then we kept doing that until I think it was February of 2022. We submitted our final student loan payment. And again, that was a pivotal moment because no longer it was, well, do we pay off debt or do we buy more real estate? It was just, well, now we can just invest.
It was exciting.
And that
Yeah.
was like one of those hockey stick moments for us.
So I wanted to get into your buy box. Like when you guys are looking for properties to buy, what are you looking for? Are you interested in doing a value add? Are you looking for something right out of the gate that's going to cash flow? Talk to me a little bit about what your strategy is there.
Yeah. So for us, we always joke, we're not Chip and Joanna Gaines in the sense that we're not doing these heavy value add, full gut rehabs and stuff like that. It looks great on the internet. For us, it would just be really overwhelming. So
Mhm.
for us, we always would try to find properties that weren't so much distress, but maybe the owner had some type of distress. Are there problems, that we can help solve? And in a roundabout way, that's actually something, from our human services background is our focus was never the property, it was on the person. And so that kind of gave us at a time when real estate gets progressively more competitive. That was always something that kind of gave us a unique edge, if you will. But we like properties that are in, I would say, B class neighborhoods, small multifamily, so 2 to 4 units, within close proximity to a walkable downtown. I joke, but I'm pretty serious about it too. I always like to buy within, say, 2 to 3 miles of a Starbucks, as well as maybe like a Target or a Home Depot, these big economic drivers, because they have a bunch of data that says this is a fortuitous area for us to operate. And then, if there's ways for us to improve the property from a cosmetic perspective, great. A lot of the properties that we buy, the owners have had it for a long time. So the rents are quite a bit below market. So we can improve the operating efficiency from there.
I want to say too, for folks that are listening that might be like aspiring investors or new investors, Josh just very articulately rattled off the buy box that we have. When we were looking for our first, even second rental property, it was like, I want to feel safe here. And I don't want it to be like a total horrific property. We did not even know what the word buy box was. It was really like, I think that oftentimes we ask investors, "What's your buy box?" And if you're new, that can feel overwhelming. Like, you may not know what your buy box is. We didn't realize certain aspects until we got a few properties under our belt and we're like, "Oh, we definitely need to look for this in the next one." So I think the more experience and time you have in the game, you really refine like what makes sense for you as people and investors. As Josh said, like there are many people doing way more like exotic and crazy things in real estate. Like we're pretty basic and we're going on fundamentals and it works for us. Like we're not doing crazy gut rehabs. We're not, buying mega complexes. We're consistently buying, 1 to 2 properties a year and it's going to get us to our goals just fine. So I think it's really knowing who you are and what you want to take on and what you want your life to look like. And then that will help you inform like what types of properties and investments you want to make.
And are you guys doing your own property management or do you farm that off to somebody else?
So we self manage our units in the sense that we are our main point of contact for all tenants and contractors, but we definitely hire out for the vast majority of work that needs to get done. So if we have, a property maintenance issue or something like that, we definitely hire that work out, but we are still very, very hands on with, speaking to tenants and turning over units and finding new tenants for our properties because I think that I don't know if I'll ever be able to hand over the reins for that because I think no one cares more about your property than you and it's really important that we have people in there that are responsible and going to treat the spaces with respect.
And then as our portfolio has grown, we still manage most of the bookkeeping, but we also have the CPA and service to help manage that as well to optimize those tax deductions.
Yeah. We talked about that you were on the podcast with Robert Leonard about 3 years ago. So I wanted to hear a little bit about how Ali and Josh have changed from 3 years ago to how you are now, like how your mindsets have changed, how your strategies have changed, just how you're different from those people 3 years ago that did that interview with Robert.
Mm.
I think one of the biggest things is so I was an entrepreneur already. And I, in the sense of when we did that interview, but even then, my understanding of, what my value was, like limiting beliefs around the value of our time.
Mhm.
And for us, we'd always been, 9 to 5 workers and stuff like that. And other people always told us, this is how much your time is worth in essence, and this is what we'll pay you for your time. Um, and so I would say that today, as predominantly real estate investors, but also entrepreneurs, understanding um, the earning potential depending on the skills and knowledge and expertise that you have. I think that can be incredibly important. And something that Ali brought up prior to us kind of getting on is, um, you know, maybe early on when you're just getting started, not having a lot of money, doing scrappy things. Sure, you have to get started there. But I think sometimes what I see too much on the internet now is uh, kind of this like, let's just quit your job and figure it out.
Quit your job. You don't need good credit. You don't need any money.
Yeah.
You can buy a bunch of rentals and get rich. And like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, right, as Josh said in the beginning, we had no money. We didn't have resources. We were very scrappy and we were also very fortunate that nothing went wrong.
Hmm.
But now, on the other side of it all, it's a little terrifying to think what would have happened if things did go wrong. We would have had to put repairs on credit cards. We would have gotten
Yeah.
into more debt and we would have had to figure it out. But now, looking at it, I think we have a more balanced perspective of like, it is important to have savings and cash in the bank and reserves, and then more reserves for your reserves and plans and systems in place for when things break and when things go wrong, because they will.
Hmm.
We have to replace a roof and we're getting quotes upwards of 20,000. We ended up finding one for a lot less, but like these are things that can happen and
Yep.
you need to be prepared. So I think that we definitely have a more um I don't know what word I want to use, but our perspective is a little more, sorry, pause because my brain is not functioning.
No, that's all right.
No, I think it's a more balanced mindset because I think, yes, we have come to better understand that your time can be worth so much more than maybe what a traditional 9 to 5 job will pay you. But on the flip side, until 2023, so last year, we both had part-time jobs, 9 to 5
Hmm.
jobs. Which was a huge asset. I think something people don't understand for those who are interested in real estate. They're very eager to leave the 9 to 5 job because they don't need a job. Well, how are you going to qualify for a loan? Banks really
Right.
like W-2 work. I can't tell you how many people, Patrick, I've spoken to who quit their quote unquote dumb 9 to 5 job to be their own boss. And then they thought, yeah, I'm just going to walk into a bank. And the bank said, great, come and talk to us 2 years from now when you
Yep.
have consistent work history. So I think, yes, so one, understand that your earning potential is much higher than what you thought. We didn't really understand that in 2021. We have a better appreciation for today. But also understand that what a valuable asset a good, fair 9 to 5 job can be,
Mhm.
and use it as long as it makes sense and build everything else in conjunction with it.
I wanted to let's see here. Where do I want to go? All this gets edited out, by the way.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. It's all good.
um, let's see. I had a question that I was really intrigued. Oh, so I wanted to hear a little bit maybe about we talked a little prior to the interview about seller financing. So
Mhm.
definitely I agree with you that having a W-2 in place is really important when you're getting started. It's really hard to find traditional financing otherwise. You're not going to find it probably.
Right.
So but Talk to me a little bit about seller financing because it seems like that's an arena that you are exploring or have used.
Yeah, I think I almost feel like we're kind of in a golden era a little bit where um, the 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 rate of people who are I think turning 65 or retirement age every day is like 10,000 people. So I would wager that most of the real estate, rental real estate that's owned by small landlords, most of those people are probably nearing retirement age, at retirement age, etc. So that's where most of the real estate is owned. um, we interface with a lot of people who are at that age, and most of them they like the monthly income. They're not interested in fully selling off their portfolio and taking on a really big tax hit right now. And so they're open to being creative. And a lot of times they have no debt against the properties. And so for us, especially as we were, venturing into understanding how can we continue to grow our portfolio, but we can't always put down 25%
Or we don't want to.
or we don't want to, right?
Right.
So that kind of forced us to learn what's often referred to as creative finance. And one of those strategies that we've used, we're about to use it again here in a couple months, is seller financing, where, instead of us having to do what a bank tells us, the owners of the property become a bank. So we can negotiate what works best for everyone. And again, to go back to our kind of our human services background and how it parlays into real estate, is what problems do these sellers have? How can we solve those in a mutually beneficial way? And so we have retirees right now that act as private money lenders. And so we're supplementing their retirement income. And
Mhm.
we also have retirees now who are owner financing multifamily properties to us, and we're helping supplement their retirement income that way too. So it's mutually beneficial.
How do you go about finding those people and how do you educate them? Because I imagine in a lot of cases, there's a lot of questions. Let's say for a retiring baby boomer, they don't know what you're proposing really. So talk to me a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so our biggest thing is, I mean, we network a ton. I
Mhm.
think sometimes people want to just spend time scrolling on Zillow, and in their mind, that's how they're actively searching for real estate. And in our experience, maybe more than any other industry, real estate is a people business.
Mhm.
So Allie talks a lot about we let people know who we are, our backstory. We're grateful to have the social media platform that we do now, where people can learn more about us, but we're constantly networking to meet people. And then through those conversations, better understanding the type of portfolios they have, but then also kind of what their vision is beyond real estate, what kind of lifestyle they're looking to have. And then if we get the impression that maybe the properties they own, again, these individuals tend to be a little bit older. If they're not really interested in managing real estate anymore, and we understand that the goals that they have align with something that would work for seller financing, then we open up those conversations more.
Yeah, I think for us, we really, and again, this is helpful because we invest where we live. So we're able to do a lot of more personalized networking, but we're very big on being active members of our community, getting to know other investors, other real estate agents. People in our area know who we are and they know where we buy and invest. And that's not an accident. And
Mhm.
we try to communicate that pretty clearly to everyone in our life that we know. And I think when it comes to seller financing and those more creative deals, having that relationship and being what we term ourselves as like professional problem solvers, that's important. And I think for us, whenever we're approaching anyone about a deal, whether we're looking for a private lender or we're interested in seller financing, we never want to make anyone feel like pigeonholed or pressured, like, can you lend us money? It's more, we're looking for private lending opportunities. We have this deal. Here's the numbers. Do you know anyone in your network that may be interested? And when you frame it like that, I think it takes the pressure off of the person and it can
Mhm.
make them more receptive to different opportunities that you may have.
Yeah, those are good points. So do you guys actively go to real estate meetups in town? And I mean, you're obviously active online, but it sounds like you've really gotten engaged in the community with the realtors, brokers, things like that.
Oh,
I
constantly.
will say I'm so grateful we did all of this before we had a kid because, like, life has gone out the window with a newborn, but prior to being parents, I mean, Josh has probably taken every person in real estate out for coffee in our city, and just pick
That's
their brain and connect with them. So I think a ton of networking. We did go to a lot of real estate meetups. At this point, we're 6 years in it. The networking has paid off to the point where we have so many connections. We don't need to actively network as much. But with that being said, we're always talking to people in the space, and all of that. But yeah, I think that sometimes it's like, well, I'm on Zillow, or, you want that easy button to find deals. And in our experience, finding deals comes at a cost, and it's either your time or your money. So you're
mhm.
spending your time actively networking and making connections, or you're spending your money on people that can do like direct mailers or cold calling for you, or other ways to get access to deals. So I think that there's no easy button or like passive way to get those deals. You're spending something.
And something I would say too is like playing the long game. So, for
Mhm.
instance, in 2022, we bought an off-market 3-unit deal for $190,000 cash. Now, 180,000 of that was someone else's cash, and the property came to us from a lawn care service provider who I had been networking with, and we had personally used their service for 2 years,
Right.
and always kind of putting that in their ear. Hey, we're looking for our next property. This is what we own. If you hear of anything, and it was always, oh yeah, yeah, I'll let you know. Well, one day after 2 years of letting them know, he said, hey, just wanted to confirm, are you actually looking for properties? Why, yes, we are. We found a property, and 30 days later, we had it under contract, and we had simultaneously been networking with a retired couple who subsequently became the lender on that. So always working those relationships. And I always tell people, like, a lot of times for assets, when people think of assets, they think of maybe real estate or stock or business or cash. Social capital,
Mm.
social equity, it grows faster than probably anything else, especially if you nurture it. And that's been paying dividends now for us for many years.
How do you build that trust for somebody that's interested in a private loan and approaching people? Like, do you have any recommendations on how to build trust? Because that's for somebody to give you $180,000 to loan it to you, that's a difficult ask for a lot of people. So, any thoughts on that?
I think that what's really important is, again, getting to know someone and maybe sharing your background and your story and your experience. I think for a first time investor to get private capital, it may be a little more challenging because you don't necessarily have like a real estate resume that you can show them of, this is my experience, this is what I've done. But I think a lot of times when people are looking for private or hard money, they're going to first maybe handshake relationships that they already have, family, friends. Maybe they need to go more out beyond that if they don't have that immediate circle, which we didn't have family and
Nope.
friends. So it was more so networking. And for us, we're very data driven. So we had a property that we were looking at. We had an entire write up of the property. This is the cost. This is what we think the after repair value is. This is what the rents are going to be. And this is what your return on investment would be. So we just had all of that. So it's not like, hey, can we borrow your money? It's very much like, this is an opportunity. If you know of anyone, we'd love to talk. And I think that comes across in a more professional way. Yes, it's a people relationship building, but it's a business. So we really
Mhm.
try to be as professional as
And
possible.
one thing we really advocate for more now than ever is building your digital resume. I can tell you that over the years on our personal Facebooks, whenever we were buying a property or fixing up a property or just different real estate related activities that we're doing, we were making posts on Facebook. And it wasn't for the purpose of getting all these likes and comments or anything like that. Full disclosure, I knew that someone would see that who was also a real estate investor, and
Yeah.
maybe it wasn't on the first post, the fifth post, the 100th post, but at one point in time, someone would see that and it would be the right time in the right place. And again, the private money lenders who partnered with us back in 2022 on that 3-unit deal were friends on Facebook, right? So we were sharing with them, we were showing the world, if you will,
It helps with your credibility.
and that
Mm.
paid dividends.
Yeah, I think that's such a huge strategy that people overlook, and it's easy to do. Like, you're doing the project, so just take some photos and throw it up, and people, like you said, are going to see it. It does build credibility and trust. I had an interview yesterday with a guy he's a tax professional, does taxes for small business owners and real estate investors, and he strictly built his practice through Twitter and Instagram.
Yep.
That's
Mhm.
it. And it's incredible to me. Like it's kind of a blows my mind. It makes me realize I need to do
Yeah.
more of it. So I wanted to hear actually about that when you guys first became the FI couple,
Mm.
you're on Instagram, sounded like Facebook a little bit. Did you have a strategy on how you were going to build out this social media presence and how did that unfold for you?
I wish I could say we did. I but we did not. I it was during COVID. We had always said we wanted an us thing. It was Allie goes to her job, Josh goes to his job. We wanted an us. And I literally had a dream and I woke up in the middle of the night that we should start an Instagram documenting our journey to financial independence. And Josh thought it was a horrible idea because we're not social media people. Like if you go on our personal pages, we weren't constantly posting. We weren't really
Yeah.
into that stuff. So it was very like out of left field. But I think the drive for it was in our real life, we had no friends or family that had any interest in real estate and personal finance. And it felt like we had no one to talk to. So we
Mm,
really were craving that community. So if we didn't have it, why don't we build it? So we did. And to our surprise, a lot of people also wanted that community. And it really helped the Phi couple become what it is today. But we had no content strategy, expectations. I don't even think we really knew that it could be like a full on business. But it's become this incredible means of helping other people learn how to invest, connecting with other investors, networking. I think that we're much better investors because of the Phi couple and the people that we've met along the way. So, and I think too, we didn't realize how much strategy and bandwidth goes into all of that. There's a lot.
a lot.
But it's been a learning process.
That's cool. And we talked a little bit about the potential of doing a podcast or the podcast. Do you think do you do a newsletter at this point? I'm just curious, like how you have monetized it and grown the community.
Yeah. So I think at the time of this recording, I think collectively we're right around 300, maybe 300,000, a little bit more collective followers. Most of that is Instagram.
Mhm.
And then as well as Twitter. I think Twitter, we have maybe 76,000 followers. And then we do have a fairly active newsletter of, I think, 19,200 subscribers or so at this time. And yeah, I mean, one, including today, we've loved podcasts. Allie was actually a DJ in college. She's very,
Oh,
very
wow.
talented with that. And so it's definitely something that we've thought about for so long. And then there's always been a reason, really the last year or so, 2 years is family planning. So I do think that'll be kind of the next component of our kind of our media, business, if you will. So now it's just a matter of figuring out kind of how we want to do it and do it well.
I wanted to hear if like it has surprised you the success that you've had with how it's taken off, the FI couple.
Yeah, I think it was totally and completely shocking where the FI couple started and then where it's gone today. I think that what I will say is like the biggest takeaway, especially coming from human service backgrounds of making very little income and you have a boss and they tell you that you get your 2% raise. And it was very like in that mindset, having a digital business in addition to a real estate portfolio, it's really opened up our minds to like, there is such an abundance of money in the world and there is
Mm,
such an abundance of opportunities.
mhm.
And we live in a time today where you can make money through your phone and it's amazing. And it's just, it's been really powerful for us and a big driver in our FI journey. And I think that if someone's listening and they're interested in leaving their job or creating a side hustle, there are so many opportunities through your phone and on the internet to do so.
And I would just add that similar to real estate, where we didn't really have these big grandiose visions when we got started, it was just kind of like a means to an end a little bit.
Mhm.
Social media at first, we had no idea what we were doing. It was just like, hey, a lot of these stories we hear about in financial freedom, they didn't really make a lot of mistakes. They had high incomes. Their family was able to help out. That's not us. Let's tell
Yeah.
our story, and maybe the everyday average person can relate. Well, fast forward, we've learned a ton about social media, and we have a very robust back end system now. And it's very, very technical. It's very, very calculated in everything that we do. And so, one thing I will add to people is sometimes I think the image of social media looks like, oh yeah, you just click post and hundreds of
Making little reels and,
Yeah.
there
Right.
was so much time, energy, and effort for a 6-second video, if you will, that goes into
Mhm.
that. So if someone did aspire to make it, a part-time business or something that they do, there is so much that goes behind it. But thankfully, there's also so much free information on the internet, similar to real estate, that they can learn how to make it viable.
Mhm.
Well, it's been fun watching your guys' journey. Like I said, you were on the show 3 years ago, and it's just fun to see how you guys have progressed, and I wish you all the best, especially with the baby. But for
Thank
people
you.
who wanted to learn more about you that aren't familiar, how can they learn about you, reach out to you, things like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're the at the FI couple on pretty much every social platform. We have a website called theficouple.com. There's a contact button there. So those are probably the best ways to connect with us through one of our social platforms or directly on our website. People can learn more or reach out. But it's always nice to connect with folks that hear us via different podcasts and whatnot.
Yeah, thank you again for having us, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, Allie and Josh. I really appreciate it. This is fun to hear your story.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome.
Whenever you have hundreds of thousands of dollars of potential, tax deductions from things like cost segregation, you can use that to potentially offset your income. That's like right up my alley of like, what I'm very familiar with. I've studied the passive activity loss audit technique guide and like all the different IRS publications they have out there. So that's just like there's all different niches, and I just happen to really I like the real estate